I used to be called the tech backbone of this law firm. For 8 years, the system I built never failed saving millions each year. Then a young, smug CTO showed up hand in hand with the assistant who once called me her mentor and said in front of everyone, "We're eliminating this outdated software." No one looked at me. No one spoke up. But what they didn't know, a hidden line of code no one ever touched. And when the federal auditors came, their world collapsed right before their eyes. My name is Isaac Flores. I'm a senior software engineer at Kelmore Legal, a law firm based in downtown Denver, serving high-profile federal clients across the country. For 8 years, I led the internal systems team. I built Kelsey's, our in-house case management platform, from scratch. That system saved the firm over $12 million in operational costs and helped us win more cases than I can count, thanks to the intelligent alert system I personally wrote into the backend. And yet here I was, sitting off to the side in our annual strategic planning meeting, a seat I hadn't occupied in almost a decade. The conference room on the 17th floor had a panoramic view of the city. Bright autumn sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bouncing off the walnut wood table in polished steel accents. I sat quietly with my usual espresso and laptop in front of me, one hand resting on the small USB drive in my pocket, a habit. It contained a version of the original Kelsey's code I'd written years ago, a version no one else had access to. "Let's get started," said Clara, the firm's COO. "Jonathan Pierce, our new CTO, will present his IT roadmap moving forward." Jonathan took the floor, a sleek iPad in one hand, the other gesturing with the kind of confidence only a fast-rising tech exec from San Francisco could muster. Early 30s Navy suit, sharp jawline, and eyes that scanned the room like he was measuring everyone's usefulness by the millisecond. I didn't hate Jonathan, not yet, but I knew he hadn't come to play nice. "Good morning," he said. "The legal industry is changing. Our clients expect more than sharp attorneys. They want smart data, automated insights, real-time analysis. And frankly, Kelsys can't deliver that anymore." He clicked through his slides. "Our current system takes 9.7 seconds to process a 200-page document, Verdant Legal Pro. Our proposed replacement does it in 1.2 seconds. Kelsey's doesn't support containerization, doesn't run on microservices, and certainly doesn't verify blockchain-based financial transfers. Verdant does." The words weren't entirely wrong. Kelsey's was old school by design. I prioritized stability over trendy frameworks. But the way he dismissed it, like it was a broken toy left behind at a startup party, that stung. Then his eyes landed on me. "I want to acknowledge Mr. Flores for building Kelsey's," he said. "It served its purpose, but it's time to move forward." There was no applause, just a few nods, some whispered side conversations from the younger devs in the back. I opened my mouth to speak, but then I saw her, Emily. She was sitting directly to Jonathan's left, leaning slightly toward him, jotting notes on his iPad. Emily, who I'd mentored 3 years ago, when she was just a wide-eyed intern who couldn't tell the difference between front-end and back-end. Emily, who once told me the night before her coding evaluation, "If I pass tomorrow, it'll be because of you." And she did pass because I stayed up all night debugging her project line by line. She looked at me. No anger, no sympathy, just nothing. After the meeting, Clara announced that Emily would lead the Verdant transition team directly under Jonathan's oversight. I stood planning to offer a simple congrats, something professional. But Emily packed her tablet, brushed past me without a word. Her fingers clutched the iPad, tight thumb, pressed white-knuckled against the metal edge. I didn't follow her. I didn't speak. I just walked the long hallway outside the glass-paneled room, down to the lounge overlooking Broadway. The smell of fresh ground coffee from the machine below wafted faintly through the vent above. Was this about ambition? Had she really picked the winning side that fast? In the elevator, my shoulder bumped against my coat pocket. My fingers brushed the familiar shape of the USB drive. 3 years ago, I embedded a small security watermark into the Kelsey's core, just in case. Not for sabotage, for ownership, for proof. Nobody knew it was there. I looked up into the mirrored elevator walls. My face had aged more than I realized, but my eyes, they still burned. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, I got an email from HR. No explanation, no meeting, no warning, just a single line. "Effective next week, Isaac Flores will transition to legacy system maintenance under the Verdant development team's technical direction. I read it 3 times. Under the Verdant team's technical direction, that line hit harder than any demotion ever could. I wasn't the type to cling to titles, but I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't a transfer. It was a quiet erasure. The archival department was located on basement level 1. No windows, spotty ventilation, and the only hum came from ancient printers wheezing out physical records. It was the kind of place you sent people to be forgotten. I brought my workstation down myself along with a few boxes of old files. No one offered to help. I sat at a dusty desk and booted up the monitor. And once again, I logged into the only place that still remembered me, Kelsey's. My admin credentials hadn't been revoked yet. That was their first mistake. I pulled up the system logs for Verdant Legal Pro. I'd written the original document processing modules in Kelsey, some of which were suspiciously similar to what Verdant had implemented. And buried deep inside those modules was something only I knew about, a watermark script I'd written in 2021. It wasn't malicious. It didn't interfere with anything. But it logged every system ID that called the module and sent that data to a private server I maintain. A fingerprint, a digital signature, something to prove my work had been stolen if it ever came to that. At first, I just wanted to protect my code, but then I started noticing anomalies. API requests from Verdant's system going to IPs outside of Kelmore's network. Post commands transmitting encrypted financial metadata to remote addresses. One kept pinging a server in Tallinn, Estonia. Estonia Natsaranonim froze. Why would a US law firm be routing client data encrypted or not to Eastern Europe? I captured the logs, screenshotted everything, saved them to my external SSD and a separate cloud server I'd been paying for out of pocket for years. That night, Emily showed up in the basement. She didn't meet my eyes. Tablet in hand, she handed me a list. There's a metadata issue in the new system, she said. They need you to retrieve the original files from the legacy archive. I nodded, not a word. Are you doing okay? She asked after a long pause. I looked up. No sarcasm, no bitterness, just a quiet truth. I'm not upset about the position, I said. I'm upset that no one seems to care what we built. She looked down at her tablet. Her thumb was pressing into the edge again, knuckle white. I didn't have a lot of choices, Isaac, she whispered. Jonathan? He's persuasive. He promised to get me into the DOJ's AI initiative. A trade for loyalty. A trade for something I never thought I'd have to lose. She replied, then turned away. But just before she reached the door, she stopped. You should delete anything related to Kelsey's. They're planning a full audit during the upcoming federal review. Appreciate the tip, I said, but I don't keep important things where they expect them. That night, I reviewed the logs again. 12 API hits in 72 hours, all directed toward the hidden endpoints. Multiple credentials traced back to the new development team, and even one to Jonathan's own admin login, pierce.devokelmerlegal.com. And then it hit me. Jonathan wasn't just pushing a new system. He was siphoning data, potentially federal data, through stolen code and unauthorized APIs to a shadow server. He was laying the groundwork for something off-grid, maybe a competing product, maybe worse. I didn't have the full picture, but I had enough to build the edges of it. I had timestamps, log chains, the original source code, proof that Verdant's architecture was not only derivative, it was illegal, and I knew the audit was coming. They thought I was out of the game, that I'd been shelved, erased, but I still had pieces on the board, and this time I wasn't playing defense. 3 days later, the basement turned into the busiest room in the entire building. Julia Harris, one of the firm's senior attorneys, showed up flanked by a junior IT associate who looked like he just walked through a thunderstorm. Isaac, she said, we've got a problem. Verdant Legal Pro failed to retrieve the annotated version of the Blackridge file. Client's upstairs waiting. We need the legacy backup. Fast. I didn't ask questions, just sat down, opened my terminal, authenticated into the Kelsey's archive server, and within 8 minutes flat, I had restored the complete file set. Every annotation, every timestamp, every legal edit and flag. You want me to print it or send it via secure link, I asked. Julia stared at me clearly, torn between amazement and something else. Maybe guilt, maybe confusion. Just email it internally. Thanks, Isaac, she said. Didn't think anyone still knew how the system worked. I smiled faintly. some of us never forgot. That afternoon, I monitored Verdant's live logs again. The errors were stacking up. Not just metadata mismatches. Some user credentials were being flagged as unauthorized even when they belonged to senior partners. The system was breaking silently but surely. The higher-ups had to know something was wrong, but I bet Jonathan was already feeding them another polished PDF report with graphs and tech jargon, blaming the hiccups on infrastructure transition latency. I launched my document editor and typed the title of a new report, Technical Breach and IP Violation Analysis Kelsis versus Verdant. Then I got to work, original source code from my 2021 GitHub repo with notarized commit history. Log entries showing Verdant systems calling functions that bore my original signature. Comparisons of processing speed error, rate, and endpoint behavior. Traffic analysis showing suspicious data exchanges with offshore servers, some routed through a known shell company in Estonia. I encrypted everything save 2 copies, one on my home SSD, the other on a cloud server under an alias I'd used since college. I didn't trust anything local anymore. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "This is Rick Jansen," the voice said. "Cybersecurity Division, Federal Trade Commission." He didn't wait for me to respond. We received a packet from an anonymous source. The contents matched some concerns we've had about Verdant Legal Pro. Someone embedded technical watermarks, clearly your work. I kept my mouth shut. "I'm not asking you to confirm anything right now," he continued, "but we'd like to meet, quietly, off record." "Why me?" "Because you're the only person who can verify that your firm's been compromised from the inside. And if we're right, the implications affect federal contract integrity." We arranged to meet the next morning. A cafe just off Civic Center Park. No security cameras. No public Wi-Fi. No reason for a federal agent or a disgruntled engineer to be there. I arrived 10 minutes early, dressed in a gray coat and a low-profile ball cap. Rick arrived on time, mid-50s, rimless glasses, steady voice, and the kind of presence that said he'd seen more than he let on. I didn't hand him the report. Not yet. I just showed him a printed copy of one script, my watermark code complete with SHA-256 hash and GitHub commit date. He leaned in, studied it, then gave a small nod. "We've suspected Verdant for a while," he admitted, "but no one's had the guts or proof to take them down. If you're willing to cooperate, we'll launch a formal investigation." And me, I asked, "If what you're offering is original, verifiable, and complete, then yes, we'll shield you under whistleblower protection." I didn't answer. Not then. But as I left the cafe, I knew I'd just tipped the first domino. Back at Kelmore, things moved fast. Emily texted me later that night. "He's starting to ask about access logs. Be careful. He's on to me. He's on to someone. But I think he's starting to clean house." 2 days later, Rick called again. The federal investigation had begun. If he's using stolen code to build a shadow platform on federal data, Rick said we're looking at felony-grade infractions. "We'll need everything you've got soon?" That night, I got a call from an internal extension. It was Emily. Her voice was tight. "He found a draft email. I didn't send it, just saved it in my outbox. But he found it anyway." "Where are you at the office?" "He locked me out of my own accounts." "And Isaac, I think he planted surveillance software on my machine. Can you leave? I have my car. Just don't know where to go. Go to the Rivergate Inn, room 2101. I stayed there once. Quiet, no questions asked. I'll handle the rest." I called Rick, immediately informed him Emily might be in danger and had critical evidence. He didn't hesitate. "If she'll testify, we'll protect her." I messaged Emily the address. She didn't reply. But 15 minutes later, I saw the Rivergate's front desk camera feed an anonymous brunette in a slate gray blazer checking in head down. I exhaled. The walls around Jonathan were closing in. 3 days later, I was summoned to the 16th floor. No calendar invite, no agenda. Just a subject line: "Internal security access request, urgent." When I stepped into the room, the tension was thick as glass. Jonathan was already there, along with Emily, the firm's in-house counsel, and someone from HR I barely recognized. No handshakes, no smiles. He motioned to the chair across from him. "Have a seat, Isaac." I sat. Jonathan opened his laptop and flipped it toward me. Lines of system logs filled the screen, some real, some clearly doctored. We've detected unauthorized access to protected areas within our IT infrastructure, he began. The access originated from an administrator-level account that somehow was never decommissioned. Yours. My eyes didn't flinch. I've been maintaining the legacy system. That account is required. Right, he said, nodding slowly. But this access wasn't just to Kelsey's. We found requests hitting live Verdant endpoints, including APIs that don't fall under your purview. We also traced outbound activity and upload to a non-Kelmore IP. He paused. Do you have anything you'd like to share? You accusing me of something or not making accusations, the HR rep cut in. Just following protocol. Given the sensitive nature of our client data and upcoming federal audit, we've escalated to our internal review board. Jonathan leaned in. Until this is resolved, you're being suspended from all system access. Effective immediately. Please surrender your badge and any devices linked to Kelmore networks. I let the silence hang before responding. I'll need a written copy of those directives, I said calmly, and my legal counsel will be in touch. That afternoon, I left through the side entrance with nothing but a small backpack. I'd already wiped my work laptop. The real files were safe off-site, encrypted, and backed up 3 ways. What I didn't expect was that someone on the inside had jumped the gun. The data I thought only I had noticed was clearly on Jonathan's radar, and I had one guess who tipped him off. That night, Emily texted, "You got suspended, didn't you?" "Yeah, he found out someone sent logs outside. Not sure how. But he's scanning every email account. You worried he'll find yours?" A long pause. "No, I'm worried he's going to start covering his tracks." The next day, Rick called. "We're moving forward. FTC's cybersecurity unit is in. DOJ's been alerted. You need to keep your head down." "What about Emily? If she testifies, we'll get her into protective whistleblower status." But I hadn't told Rick what Emily told me next. That night, she called from a locked stairwell inside Kelmore. "Jonathan saw the draft I saved," she whispered. "I didn't send it, I swear." But he saw it anyway. "Where are you now, still inside?" He cut off my credentials. "I think he installed surveillance software on my machine. I can't prove it, but I feel watched. Leave. Now. I've got my car. Just tell me where to go." I gave her the address of a boutique hotel I once used when my kitchen flooded during a renovation. Quiet, no corporate accounts, no prying eyes. "Don't go home," I said. "Not yet." The next morning, I received another call from Rick. "We're classifying this as a live federal case now. We need Emily's testimony. If she's ready, bring her in." I sent her a secure location, and later that evening, I watched through an encrypted webcam feed as she checked into the hotel. She looked tired but determined. I sent her one text, "You okay?" She didn't reply until hours later. "As okay as I can be, but you were right. It was never just about the software." 2 days later, I was called back to Kelmore. Not for reinstatement, just to pick up my personal belongings. While I was waiting in the lobby, Jonathan walked past perfectly composed in a fitted navy suit. His usual calculated smile was there. But this time, there was something else behind it. Something fractured. "Hope you land somewhere more suited to your style," he said, pausing just long enough to let the condescension settle in. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled a single sheet from my folder and let it brush past his view, a printout of the plagiarized API code complete with matching variable names, timestamps, and a link to the original commit on my GitHub repository. I didn't hand it to him. I didn't have to. I just watched him walk away. And I thought to myself, "You're not sinking yet, Jonathan, but you will, and you won't see it coming." I might have been off Kelmore's systems, but I was far from out of the game. 3 days after the investigation launched, I got a secured message from Rick. "Organize your evidence. We need a complete package ready within 72 hours. It's going into the first wave of federal filings." I powered up my personal server, the one they didn't know about. I began assembling everything like a forensics puzzle only I could solve. All the logs, the original source code, screenshots of API calls that matched my unique syntax, dates, file hashes. And then I found something new, an endpoint buried deep in Verdant's backend, encrypted harder than the others. I ran one of my old Kelsey's decoders, just on a hunch. What I uncovered, a parallel data repository, hosted on a masked domain, physically located in New Mexico. It was feeding off Kelmore's infrastructure, but it didn't belong to Kelmore. Jonathan wasn't just leaking data, he was building a clone off-site, unregulated, and entirely off the books. I sent the logs to Rick immediately. An hour later, he called me, voice tighter than usual. This is bigger than IP theft. If he's using federal case data to train an off-site AI platform, that's a felony under multiple statutes. You've just opened the door to criminal conspiracy. That same night, Emily texted, "You need to come to the hotel. I found something. A contract. Hidden." I arrived in under 20 minutes. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were locked in. In her hands was a manila folder, thin but heavy in consequence. Inside, a cooperation agreement between Kelmore and a company I'd never heard of, Orion Advanced Systems. Buried in the language was a clause authorizing the use of anonymized client data for AI-based legal research. Signed by Jonathan. Undated. No board approval attached. I searched for Orion. Nothing in Colorado, but in New Mexico, a paper trail, buried deep under shell entities, one of which had already been fined by the FTC in 2021 for unauthorized data handling. I looked at Emily. "Where'd you get this shared folder? No password." He didn't think anyone would dig past the first layer. She smiled faintly. "But I remembered how you taught me to crawl hidden endpoints, back when I didn't even know what JSON was." We sat in silence for a long beat. "Do you hate me?" she asked softly. I shook my head. I hate that I didn't see this coming. Within 48 hours, both of us were under provisional whistleblower protection. Emily gave a full statement. I submitted technical evidence, line-by-line comparisons, source metadata, time-stamped logs, and a screen recording of Verdant's interface, executing functions identical to my original Kelsey's modules. This wasn't a vendetta anymore. This was a federal case. And Jonathan? He wasn't backing down. The smear campaign started on a Monday. Tech blogs lit up with anonymous tips claiming I'd been responsible for legacy system failures, that I was under internal review, that I'd been reprimanded for mismanaging client data. I recognized it immediately, a preemptive PR defense, a tactic. He was trying to shape the narrative before the audit. Rick messaged me, "Let him spin. We've already passed your packet to FISA." Audit day arrived like a loaded gun. Operations were frozen. All client intake was paused for 24 hours. IT staff were grounded, and Verdant Legal Pro was officially placed under forensic review. Jonathan showed up at 8:00 a.m. Sharp, same Navy suit, same rehearsed smile. He had no idea that two of the federal auditors in the room had already reviewed the evidence Emily and I provided. They weren't there to observe. They were there to dismantle. It didn't take long. One auditor leaned forward. "Mr. Pierce, can you explain what Orion Connector v1.3.7 is doing in your production codebase?" Jonathan blinked. "I'm sorry, I don't recognize that module." "Really, because it calls functions that originate from the Kelsey source tree. We've verified this through git commit logs and SHA checksums." Another stepped in. "We've also matched the domain registry for the endpoint it reports to. It points to a server farm in Santa Fe operated by a company with no business registration in this state." And then, silence. Emily sat across from him. Calm, silent. She had nothing to add. She didn't need to. 12 minutes later, they shut the system down. Jonathan was escorted out of the boardroom. His laptop was seized, access revoked, and Kelmore's executive team suddenly very, very interested in what Isaac Flores had to say. 8:00 a.m. I sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Kelmore's headquarters, sipping my usual black, no sugar. Same table, same view of Civic Center Park, same USB drive in my pocket, now practically a relic. My smartwatch buzzed. A message from Rick, KT 4.4 confirmed. Phase 2 in motion. I didn't smile. I just sipped my coffee and watched the steam drift toward the window. KT 4.4 was the internal code for the Federal Systems Audit Act's active sweep. Phase 2 meant cross-examination had begun. That's where they'd start asking questions no one saw coming. And Jonathan. He walked straight into it. At 8:15 a.m., he was in the boardroom briefing a half circle of auditors, FTC reps, and Kelmore executives. His slide deck was pristine. Charts, bullet points, cost savings metrics, everything crafted to scream competence. But the moment they asked about Orion Connector v1.3.7, it all started to crack. I'm sorry, Jonathan said, maintaining that paper-thin composure. I'm unfamiliar with that module. Then how do you explain its presence in the production environment? One auditor asked, and why it mirrors line-for-line segments of proprietary code developed under a different system, Kelsis, without documented authorization. A second auditor cut in. We've traced activity to a server cluster registered under Orion Advanced Systems, a company not licensed to handle federal legal data. Jonathan tried to pivot. This was likely an artifact from a sandbox test. We never, Mr. Pierce, the lead auditor, interrupted. You signed a partnership contract with Orion. It's dated indexed and includes a data sharing clause that violates federal privacy statutes. That was when the silence hit. A thick, ugly silence, the kind that sticks to your teeth. No more slides. No more bravado. Just the sound of a man realizing he's standing on glass. And it's already cracked beneath him. Emily didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her signed affidavit and attached screen recordings spoke volumes. By 11:30 a.m., Verdant Legal Pro was ordered offline pending full investigation. By noon, Jonathan was relieved of all duties, escorted out of the building under the supervision of federal agents. His company phone confiscated, his access revoked. Kelmore's official statement, Mr. Pierce's employment, has been suspended pending the outcome of an active federal audit. But the damage was done. Not to me, to him. That evening, my phone rang. It was someone I'd never expected to hear from, the vice president of strategy. We need to talk, Isaac, she said. We're reactivating Kelsis. Temporarily. Possibly long-term. I didn't say yes, not immediately. I have conditions, I said. 1, my original IP is acknowledged in writing. 2, if you're using my new open framework, you pay license fees. And 3, I report directly to the executive team. No middle layers. A pause. Then send us your draft. We'll sign it. A week later, Jonathan's name hit the news cycle. Denver law firm CTO under investigation for data breach and IP theft. Legal tech blogs tore him apart. The DOJ issued a statement confirming active collaboration with FTC investigators regarding misappropriation of protected data assets. Orion Advanced Systems gone, vanished. Emily returned to the industry as a compliance and security advisor for a federal contractor. She's good, better than good, and she never tried to apologize again. She didn't need to. My first day back at Kelmore felt surreal. Same glass elevators, same front desk, but the difference. This time they held the door open. I didn't return to my old cubicle. I walked straight into the 14th floor executive boardroom. On the screen, the new system name, Kelsis Open Framework, powered by Floors. I took a breath, adjusted my tie, and presented the roadmap. No dramatic music, no lingering stares, just facts, clean code, and clarity. My final slide had no bullet points, no graphs, just a single sentence, bold in the center. The newest thing in the room isn't always the smartest. Sometimes the smartest is what was built right the first time. A few executives looked at one another, then one stood, another followed, and the room filled with applause, not for a comeback, but for a man they'd finally started listening to. What's the lesson? Never underestimate the person you think you pushed aside, because sometimes that person is the very foundation your new future is built on. And when they take it back, they do it without burning the building, just by proving they were the blueprint all along.